Hi, Scott Martin here. And I was hanging out with my son a couple of weeks ago at a wedding, and we were sharing some family stories. And he said, "You got to start recording some of these stories." So this is my beginning attempt at recording some of the family stories. And if it's not interesting to you, you can always click off. But it's kind of for historical purposes, and occasionally somebody will think something I have to say is interesting. So think of this as story section one if you like them. Maybe I'll keep recording them and keep sharing them. If not, I'll just keep recording them and not sharing them, and it doesn't matter. But thought it might be interesting. So the story in particular that he wanted me to talk about was my first Christmas in Africa. My parents were missionaries, not in kind of the weird way that you can be missionaries, but I'm still proud. Let me put it that way, of the work they did cross-culturally, working in partnership with national leaders for the good of the church and for the good of people in Tanzania and Kenya. And I know that's not everybody can say that about folks who are in Christian service, but I certainly am. And when we initially moved, we were supposed to be going to different countries, supposed to go to Bangladesh, and that we were just waiting. And then very sadly, a lovely missionary from Tanzania passed away. And so my parents were reassigned to take his place. And so we're going to go to Tanzania, and it was a quick turnaround, and we had to pack quickly and rush off. In really a couple of weeks, we went from thinking we were going to Bangladesh to landing and being on site in Tanzania. All that's super interesting and not the point of the story. The story is actually about the Christmas almost a year later. So 11 months later, at the beginning of December, we had been watching the newspapers and saw that the ship that carried our personal belongings was finally arriving in Dar es Salaam, the port city of Tanzania. And so we'd been waiting for 11 months. We've been watching the newspapers, having no idea when this was going to come in. We knew the name of the boat, and we just watched the newspaper, and they published when boats arrived. So, so our boat arrived in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, and my dad decides, this is cool. We're going to have Christmas with all of our own stuff. And so he and his good friend Eliezer took off in our family vehicle, which was a really cool Land Rover Series 2 in the early 80s, when they were still really cool. And they took off and went toward Arusha on their way to go get our things. And there's a whole variety of ways of telling the story, but I'm going to tell you from my perspective as an 11, 12-year-old in Africa with my 5-year-old sister. I guess she's probably 6 by then, doing homeschool. My mom was there. We had a local expat that was doing our tutoring, and that's how I spent my days. And my dad took off to go get our things. Cool, right? So that was the first week of December, and we didn't hear anything. Now, this is before cell phones. In fact, we did not have a landline where we were in Babati. There was some nuns at the Catholic mission up the road that did have a phone, and so messages could be left with them. There was also a Lutheran missionary, I think, that had a phone, and so messages from our national office in Arusha could come down to Babati, where we were. We're out in kind of the middle of nowhere. The only vehicle we had was the car that my dad had taken, that Land Rover. And so my mom and my little sister and I were preparing for Christmas. We had gotten, I think, probably a banana tree that first year that we had decorated with some homemade ornaments and probably some lights of some kind, I don't know. Some sort of Charlie Brownie kind of Christmas thing going on. And My mom was doing a good thing. I just remember in December it being a long time between, having heard from my dad and not. And we would get notices in the mail. I would take my bike and ride to the post office, and we would get these notices that we had packages that were sent from the States to our families and church supporters and so on were sending us Christmas gifts, and they were arriving at the post office in Arusha, and they didn't ship the packages from Arusha Babati. You had to go to Arusha, which is about 4 hours, 3-hour drive, to pick up your packages. So we would, as a matter of course, once a month or so, go up to Arusha and get packages. And we've been doing that for the 6 or 7 months that we've been living in Babati. So that was a familiar thing, but now we're getting these notices and they're starting to stack up a little bit. It's Christmas time and we're getting more packages than usual. And we're excited because we're getting presents from grandparents and aunties and uncles. But we don't have a car and we haven't seen Dad in now a week, 2 weeks. So on December 20th, we haven't heard anything for 20 days about my dad. Should have been there a long time ago. Haven't heard a thing. Can't reach anyone in Arusha. Now, I don't remember why that was. I don't know if the phone lines were down, or I know we didn't have a phone, but we certainly hadn't heard anything. We had sent a messenger, I believe, paid somebody's bus fare to go up to Arusha to get information. He'd come back and not had any new information about where Dad was. And so my mom decides that we can't all go to Arusha because then no one would be in Babati. And so if Dad showed back up, he'd show up and there wouldn't be anyone there, right? So that's not good. And then he wouldn't be able to tell us. So my mom decided that I would go to Arusha and get our packages and try to find some information from someone in Arusha about where Dad is. And she and my sister would stay in Babati and see if they heard anything. So it was 21st, something like that, of December. And so I get on a bus with Samueli, who's a local pastor, young guy, early 20s, that was friends with our family. We played volleyball together. I remember that. He's a tall guy. And Samueli and I would go to Arusha and get the packages. And so that's the plan. So we get a bus ticket, load on. I had not ridden the bus in Tanzania before. The first leg of the bus trip, I held the chicken for the lady sitting across the aisle from me. I'm not making that up. That's actually what happened. And then the bus got full, and being a young guy, I opted to be the stander. And so for about an hour stretch, I stood while the bus was over full. And then the last bit, the last hour or so into Arusha, I got to sit and we sat next to Samueli and we chatted in Swahili, and it was pretty funny because initially on the story, the guys across were talking about me, and they were talking with Samueli about me, and I stood out. I was only one of the only kids on the bus, but certainly the only white kid on the bus, and they were talking about me. And then at some point, Samueli said, "This is probably in Swahili. This is probably rude. We should probably tell them that you speak Swahili," which they thought was, first of all, appalling and embarrassing and extremely hilarious. And so we joked and had a good time going up to Arusha. I didn't know what I was in for. I didn't know for sure that the post office would give me the packages. I'm just a kid, right? 12, 11, something like that. And so anyway, we get to Arusha, get off the bus, and walk into town from the bus station up to the post office. We get the packages. We walk from the post office to the mission. I hadn't really figured out local transportation, so we just walked, and Samueli was cool with that. So head to the mission. I don't remember much interaction with the folks at the mission house there, other than they gave me a place to stay. They did not know anything about my dad. They assumed that he had gotten home and just not reported back. Found out the car was there in Arusha, which is weird, right? It meant that dad had gone to Dar es Salaam without the car. And that's all I knew. And so I went to bed that night, probably the 22nd-ish of December, 3 full weeks since the last time we'd heard from Dad. And I went to bed that night, not really knowing what was going on. Now let me catch you up. My dad had ridden with Eliezer with the truck from Arusha. They rented a truck in Arusha and driven to Dar es Salaam to pick up our belongings. We had 8 or 10 large barrels, and so more than could fit in a car or even a pickup. And this is a load. And so they had rented a truck there and ridden down. And then when they had everything loaded up, the truck got ready to return to Arusha and would not allow my dad and Eliezer to ride in the truck with him. So the truck took off, leaving Eliezer and my dad. This is first part of December. Schools have all let out. They're in the biggest city in Tanzania, and everyone is leaving for the month-long holiday. Government is shut down, schools are all closed, and literally every form of transportation is completely full. And so Eliezer and my dad are searching for a way back from Dar es Salaam to Arusha. In the process, they get robbed, have all their money taken. As a precaution, Eliezer and my dad had split the funds, and Eliezer had put some of the funds in his sock. And so they had that amount of money. They were staying at a compound, and so they had a place to stay there. After 3 weeks of trying to get back to Arusha from Dar es Salaam, they finally caught a ride in the opposite direction toward Dodoma, which is not toward Arusha at all. It's in the wrong direction, but it's at least out of Dar es Salaam. And so they got a ride in the back of a truck, back of a pickup to Dodoma. And so that 4 or 5 hour drive over not good roads. They get to Dodoma, get dropped off at a mission house, and there's no one there. They can't get in. And so they thought they would sleep on the porch of the house. And the watchman said that was okay, but the mosquitoes were so bad that they couldn't sleep. They were just getting eaten alive. And so the only protected space they could find was in a phone booth. Yes, a phone booth, like you would imagine. Sliding door, closed windows, plexiglass walls. The mosquitoes weren't as bad in the phone booth. And so they slept standing up together in a phone booth. And then for the next 3 days would stand out on the highway and try to hitch a ride from Dodoma up to Arusha. On day 3, now the 22nd of December, maybe 23rd by now, a bus stops and allows them to get on with whatever change they had borrowed from whoever they had borrowed from. They've been out of money for a long time. My dad tells a story. This is when he found out that Africans could also get sunburned. We were ignorant, right? And we didn't know much about culture or ethnicity at the time. And so he and Eliezer had been standing out on the road and both burned and blistered pretty badly. And that's when he found out that even Africans could get sunburned. But they get on the bus, and it's literally standing room. They ride from Dodoma up to Babati. They arrive in Babati in the middle of the night. My dad, the bus stop is about a 15, 20-minute walk from the bus stop down to where our house was, but it's on the route the bus will take. So my dad decides that he's never going to get any closer to his family than he is right now until he gets to Arusha and comes back. So he's going to go say hi to his wife, right? So he jumps off the bus. It's like midnight, 2 in the morning. He jumps off the bus and literally runs the 2 miles or whatever from the bus stop to the house, bangs on the window, wakes my mom up, said, I just need to tell you I'm alive, I'm okay, I'll be back tonight. I'm going to Arusha to get the car, I'll be back tonight. He then hears the bus coming down the road, runs out to the road and jumps on a moving bus as it's headed up the hill out of Bhavati to Arusha. Arrives in Arusha, walks to a missionary house, goes in to shower before he gets in his car to head back, and finds his 11-year-old son sleeping on the floor in the guest room. And that's where our stories intersect. He woke me up. It was a wonderful early Christmas present to see my dad. We loaded up in the Land Rover, went to the truck place, found our goods, drove with our things from Arusha to Bhavati in time to have a grand unloading and opening on Christmas Eve in Bhavati. So it's a wonderful ending to the story. Sadly, that's not the ending. It actually gets worse, but it is at least an encouraging story of reuniting our family, and it's part of our family story. So hope you enjoyed it. Part 2, the rest of Christmas. I'll try to record soon.